Chris, thank you so much for coming on the pod. For those who don't know who you are, could you please introduce yourself?
I currently view myself as an entrepreneur, as someone who pushes the boundaries, challenges the way that things are currently viewed in a bunch of different areas, with my objective of exploring new possibilities, empowering people, looking for new discoveries, finding new discoveries within myself. With all that, like to get less philosophical, I sold a marketing agency last year and sort of moved out of the B2B marketing and tech space. I still am a majority shareholder in my software company that I started in 2023 called Paceto, but I no longer operate in that business, and the team's doing amazing, which is great. And now I've been building ENCODED, which is my newest venture, which is in the personal development space, but rethinks the paradigm of personal and professional growth, which I'm excited to get further into. And also exploring for like 5 years, people have been like, yo, you should write a book. And everybody wanted me to write a book on B2B marketing. It just didn't feel right. And now I actually have 2 books in the hopper related to personal growth and human potential.
Before we get into the encoded stuff, I want to go back to the refined days a little. Not so much the work you were doing, but more, you've been through a huge evolution in your life and headspace and being. And I like the way you've put it before, that what you were in before was life version 1.0 operating system. On the outside, it looked like people's dream, right? 1% podcasts, hundreds of employees, millions in business. But that version 1.0 operating system you describe is driven by negative emotions, really. So can you talk more about what that was? Because was it a surreal experience for you having what people dream of, but what you hear from a lot of high-functioning entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, or successful people, that internal turmoil?
I've never described it this way, but I'm going to give it a shot. So imagine that you and your life are a building, right? And most people try to build the floors, right? So they try to learn more skills, productivity systems, optimize their health, do cold plunges. And the thing is that the foundation is what actually holds the building up. And as I started to get deeper into like what is the foundation, it's actually everything in your subconscious mind. And so what happens as you elevate in life, whether it's more responsibilities, you're trying to achieve more things, what's happening is that you're stacking more floors on a building that doesn't have a stable foundation. And when you do that, and then a strong wind comes or a hurricane comes, the building starts to shake. It starts to like fall over. And those are symptoms that a lot of people experience. Those symptoms might be like low-grade anxiety. I got anxiety a couple times a week for up until 2021 when I started to say, I got to do something about this. Going to make a speech and feeling like anxious, worrying about what other people think. You're going to screw up, self-doubt. Going to make a bold move and second guessing it afterwards, not being able to have clarity around the decisions you're making when hundreds of people are relying about you. You got mental noise, you're not sure what to do. Being so driven toward external achievements, having the 1% podcast, getting the next 100,000 followers, going from 10 million to 11 million, as if that really like matters that much. And I'm not, this podcast is not about not having ambition, right? Like I am a very ambitious person. I always have been. The thing that changed for me is the why underneath my ambition. Like, why am I doing it?
So what were the original foundations? What were those shaky foundations whilst you were building all those floors?
It's essentially the subconscious programming that everybody receives about how the world works. And most people have not looked deeply enough to realize that it's there. Most people, including myself in the past, just assume this is the way life is, right? That striving for the next milestone and achievements is what makes you valuable and successful, that like doing those things will impress other people and that other people might like you, that having anxiety and suffering is part of entrepreneurship, and that's just the way it is. So we should just deal with it and keep pushing through it, right? In reality, that is not how it has to work. And so I started to challenge a lot of those things about why are these things showing up in my life? And the reality is that it's because I believe that was how it's supposed to go. And so what happens is that when you believe I need to suffer to be successful, which is something that many people believe, that you actually invite suffering into your life. You actually go and look for it because you think that it's a good thing. And then through this process called confirmation bias, that you invite the suffering into your life, you believe that it's a good thing, you struggle through it, and it's not even guaranteed that there's any success afterwards. It's just struggling. And what happens is that because basically everyone believes that thing, and some people happen to be successful, that later they pass it on to everybody else as credible advice about how they got successful, and the cycle repeats itself over and over.
Yeah, survivor bias is a term I hear a lot.
And so I just started to look at this, explore the neuroscience, explore all the research that has been done. And most of the research has been historically geared toward clinical conditions, right? Like treating PTSD, like people that have conditions. So all the aim has been around fixing people. But when you take that research and you redirect it to how do I perform at the highest level possible, the same research applies. It's just taken to a different angle. Just like how exercise, if you're 300 pounds to get in shape, you could also apply that same physiological mechanisms to being Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. And so nobody has really pointed it in that direction so far. And as I've been continuing to study it, it has been fascinating how incredible it is. And as I've experienced it for myself over the past 5 years, at the beginning, I thought it was because I was special. I thought it was because I worked harder, because I was smarter. And now that I've shared it with more than 500 people now. And the process has given it's almost like you have this whole nother level of performance that you didn't know was there, like a whole nother gear, or better said, a whole nother infinite amount of gears in your potential. Because the reality is that we create our own ceiling through our subconscious beliefs, which drive our nervous system state. And the science is fascinating if you want to go there.
What's great is this is something you went through. So you're passing on your own learnings, your experience, and your knowledge to help people with what you experienced yourself. And you mentioned that mid-grade anxiety, and you previously said it took you 3 hours to go to sleep. What did it take for you to actually realize something was broken? Like, what was that point where you were like, this isn't right? Because we've said people can go through their whole life just doing this, thinking it's normal. What was the point for you where you were like, nah, something's wrong?
You're drinking 6 coffees a day. You're in 12 hours of meetings. You're getting up at 5 a.m. to go and exercise every day. You try to get in bed at 8 p.m. so you can get an adequate amount of sleep to be ready to go. And then you can't fall asleep till 11 p.m. or even later than that. And all of a sudden you're running on 5 or 6 hours of sleep for an extended period of time.
So the evidence was there, like it should be for a lot of people. So what do you think it is that triggered for you? Like, this isn't normal, because people live it like it is.
Everybody not everybody, that's overstated, but a lot of people assume that's the way it is, which is what happened for me. And what happened was 2 different unlocks. So the first one was I could deal with that when there was 4 people working at my company and we had 7 customers. When the building starts getting bigger and the wind stays the same, it starts to threaten to knock over the building. And the building isn't the business, the building's you. And so that was one thing, is you start to notice, whoa, like if I don't do something about this, like it's going to basically take me down, right? And you can feel, I started measuring my all my performance metrics on Whoop in 2020, which has been a major unlock for me in terms of my behavior and how I optimize my life. And then the second insight was simply an insight. And when the click happens, it changes your life forever, which is that most of us are conditioned to believe that our emotions are caused by the circumstances that are happening around us. It's because our spouse was rude to us. It's because that person cut us off in traffic. It's because our customer isn't happy. But it's not. The reason that our emotions are created is because of how our subconscious mind interprets what it means. Meaning that our spouse saying something, giving us feedback is neutral. What our beliefs make it mean might be they're going to leave me. And when we make it, they might leave me, then we feel anxiety. But we could easily say they're giving us direct feedback. This is an opportunity for me to be better. They're actually showing love by doing this to me. And when you think about it that way, not consciously, subconsciously, it changes your emotional state.
And when you're talking subconsciously, is this back to the foundation example almost? Like based on those foundations is how you'll receive those experiences?
Yes. So we should just go there because we might be talking about it more. So people should have the foundation of the understanding. So most of us believe that all of our thinking happens in our conscious mind, what we're aware of, which is actually about 5% of our thinking. But what controls basically every automatic process in our life is our subconscious mind. It happens automatically through neural pathways in our brain before we can even think about it. It drives our nervous system state, whether we are in the parasympathetic or the sympathetic nervous state, and it drives where all of the resources that we have in our body are allocated across our systems. Is it going to our cardiovascular system to increase our heart rate? Or is it going to our prefrontal cortex to think with clarity and regulate our emotions? We only have a certain amount of resources to use. And so if we have this underlying state of thinking that something might be going wrong or comparing ourselves to other people, it doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel like we're stressed out. But in the background, our subconscious mind is running these processes, consuming these resources. And when you're trying to operate at a high level, you need those resources. You need them to think clearly. You need them to trust yourself. You need them to be creative, to have vision, to connect with other people, to regulate your emotions. Those resources are the most important thing. And the thing is that it happens automatically before we can think about it. So all within our body. And it shows up, historically it's showed up as people think that it's a personality trait, that this person is just reactive or something like that. It's not. It's actually how their neural pathways have been wired through subconscious conditioning and prior experience, and just how those have been wired originally can be rewired through repetition. The repetition is what creates the pathway and the strength of the pathway. And so we can rewire it through repetition. So we create a stronger pathway in a different direction. And then all of a sudden our behavior moves in a different way. We automatically feel different emotions. We perceive different things in every situation. And so that level of understanding can be wildly powerful because everyone focuses on the things that happen after that, after the foundation, right? So then they think about, okay, now I'll put a productivity system on top of this. I'll hire a coach so they can walk me through something like this. I'll go and read another book or listen to another podcast. And that'll be, so all you're doing is trying to put something on top of a foundation that's allocating the resources automatically. And the real solution is to focus on that so the resources get allocated differently. And then everything that you build on top of it is a million times better.
Well, I think we probably know people who want to get to that place where they've got the foundations, and I'm probably guilty of it as well, right? I love that I'm deflecting onto
it's a
others who are
never-ending
not
process.
in the room. But there's always that belief for a lot of people in the back of their head. It's like, I'll sort the foundations once I've done X, once I get to Y, once I've built this floor. How would you convince someone to? Because the foundation sounds like a nice to have, not a must have, but obviously like when you really pause to think about it, like it's a must have. How would you convince or explain to someone that it's the first thing they should do before anything else? How would you make somebody prioritize it?
If you want to be a pro athlete, then what's the first thing that you do? You don't play in the pros. You practice. You exercise. You build the foundation, the foundational skills to excel at a high level. And if you do not build those skills and you try to go through it, you're simply not performing the way that you are. And so people, and I didn't really think this way. Like I didn't consciously think, oh, like when I get there, I'll work on this. I didn't even consider that it was a thing to work on, right? So I wasn't thinking about it that way. But a lot of people, the recognition is that in order that it is the cause of getting to where you want to go, not the effect. That rethinking how you think about your life, how you regulate your emotions, how you perceive whether something is a threat or an opportunity, whether you feel anxiety before you make a speech in the team meeting or you don't. Those are actually the cause of you getting to where you want to go, not the effect.
Obviously, we've covered the idea of like the house, the foundations, where people are at, where you're trying to take them. I want to focus on some more specific ideas that you've discussed quite openly on LinkedIn that are around ENCODED, but also your own belief systems. And it's almost like you've given them names and titles. So one to start that's not necessarily around a belief, but it's about where you see the world at, that I found interesting. I very much like the Gary, the factory worker example, because we're talking about the foundations of people, right? And them building to a point where they're strengthening it so that they can handle what's to come. But we're in a very strange time at the moment with AI changing the world of work. So for people who've not seen it, can you explain your whole philosophy around Gary, the factory worker, and how you see that tying into today's world as well?
Sure, we're going to take a step back because there's quite a bit of context, but I promise it's amazing. And I'm releasing my book in a couple of weeks that goes through all this in detail. So this is the first time I'm sharing it publicly, so it'd be really cool. Most people right now, the common conventional wisdom is that AI is going to take all the jobs. People aren't going to have any jobs, and they're going to have to like live on universal basic income, and the robots are going to kill us, and it's like a doomsday sort of story. That seems like the conventional, understanding of what's happening. And so what my intuition showed me, and then what I've continued to follow, was that we've had economic transitions like this before. And most people, when there's a technological shift, they think, okay, I need to just be the best at using the technology, right? And so if you were Gary the factory worker, right, in 1975, you've been doing factory work for 20 years, you're making a top salary, your family's happy, and they start implementing automation in the factory, then getting good at AI right now and just doing that is equivalent to becoming the best at using the machines that are going to automate your job. So the mindset switch is not about looking at it at the technology. It's looking at it about what is the economic shift going on of supply and demand. And so when we look at supply and demand of right now, for the past 50 years, it has been about knowledge work. The thing that has been the scarce premium resource is how much knowledge have you accumulated? How do you apply that knowledge? How do you process it? What are your credentials and expertise in order to deliver it, right? So that's what the whole economy has been valued on. The education system is built on it. The personal development and professional development industry, the entire economic structure is built on this premise of how much knowledge have we accumulated. So when AI now has all the knowledge, it processes it faster than a human. It accumulates way more and it works way harder than you 24/7. That entire premise breaks, right? It's no longer a scarce premium resource. And we're seeing that supply and demand shift. When the supply of that goes up, the premium's going down, meaning there are less workers, and over time they will be paid less money to do the same job. So then the question becomes, okay, so what is now the premium scarce resource, right? What is it? And my theory, which I feel very strong on, is that the premium resource is your frequency, your subconscious foundation that drives 12 major human capacity skills that are the most scarce and premium resources right now, which are things like clarity, self-trust, equanimity, emotional sovereignty, creativity, vision, autonomy, things that an AI system cannot replace, And so when we look at it practically, let's look at a business that's 1,000 employees, right? There are 1,000 employees. They have all the information. They have all the resources. They have all the AI. They're running a bunch of AI pilots. They have everything. And nobody in the business can know what are the two things that matter right now. They have all the information. They lack clarity, right? And even if you do have clarity and you know these are the two things that matter now, do you have the self-trust and the autonomy to follow them even when they're not popular, right? We have been conditioned in this era to defer our expertise and judgment to experts and people that have best practices. And that was a reliable strategy when information was scarce. But it has also trained people to look outside of themselves for validation of, is this the right decision for me? To look out for this person made a PDF, they must be smarter than me, right? When the knowledge premium goes down, self-trust and discernment and autonomy go way up. And so over time, we're at the beginning of this shift, right? When Gary the factory worker in 1975, when they started putting the automation machines in there, he kept his job for the next 7 years, right? The amount of factory workers went from like 50% of the workforce in 1950 to about 8% of the workforce today, right? The deployment of AI is way faster because it's software. You don't have to make a machine. You don't have to produce it, get it to the place, update it. So the deployment's happening faster, so the shift will happen faster. But there will be my estimate is 10 to 15 year transition that started in 2022. So we're like year 3 or year 4 into a 10 or 15 year transition where the economy will completely rebuild around this new scarce premium resources. Education will change, right? Colleges you accumulate all this debt and then you can't get a $45,000 job, right? The early education system, it doesn't teach you to trust yourself. It actually teaches you the exact opposite, that person, I have to raise my hand to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right? So it's teaching the children and young adults almost the exact opposite skills of what are going to be valued in the future. And they paste an AI course in there. They like do some things like that. When we look at Gary, right, who successfully transitioned from a factory worker to a knowledge worker, right? He stopped running the machine and started using a computer to manage the production or something like that, that he realized that he needed to stop focusing on his muscles and how he uses the machine, his body, and start using his brain. It was a new layer of economic value, right? In the factory worker example, nobody measured IQ. Nobody measured IQ for a factory worker because it wasn't economically relevant, right? Right now, in the knowledge era, nobody's measuring frequency because it's not economically relevant. It's beginning to be, right? Emotional intelligence is not the same as frequency. It's been clear that people start to value emotional intelligence more, but that is a skill, not a foundation. And so that's my thesis on this economic transition. And the people that move, right? The factory worker that shifted to a knowledge worker in 1975 captured 15 years of early mover advantage to the person that moved in 1990 when they had to, and it was a crowded market, when there was institutional adoption and it was culturally mainstream. And Gary, his children grew up in the knowledge era. He collected all these credentials, all this experience over 15 years that then became a compounding advantage for him. Instead of waiting 15 years into the mainstream to go into a crowded market, their children didn't grow up that way, and then you're sort of like, you're forced to change.
Well, so that's actually quite a nice segue because that leads into those larger ideas that you speak about in public on LinkedIn or wherever else on. We'll do them in order, but discipline versus frequency is something you've spoken about. Willpower with better branding, and discipline was the old answer. And then also the subconscious v conscious. So yeah, for that discipline v frequency side, I'd love a wee bit more detail on how you view that because discipline's been a key buzzword for like the last 10, 15 years.
And it was when information was the scarce resource, then the obvious answer, if you worked more, then you would have an advantage over other humans. You'd be able to collect more information. And if you compound that over, 1, 5, 10 years, you'll have way more information, experience, and credentials to compete in the market. Unfortunately, now you're not competing against another human. You're competing against an AI system, right? So that idea of working harder necessarily isn't necessarily a relevant advantage anymore. And when you overwork and work harder, you lose clarity, you lose self-trust, you lose emotional regulation. Those are all proven by science. And so it's actually if you believe that frequency and the skills that come from it are the most abundant or the most premium resources moving forward, then you're working against yourself necessarily. So when we think about discipline, right, what is discipline? It is forcing yourself to do something in order to achieve something that isn't aligned with who you are, right? Somebody that tries to do discipline that is, out of shape and tries to go to the gym, and I'm using a very simple example, but this can be used in leadership, in relationships, in finances, and all other places. They try to go to the gym, it's hard, and it is draining, and it's very unlikely to succeed. About 9% of the time is the current statistic that it works, and the reason is because if you are trying to go to the gym and your subconscious programs that happen automatically say, I should be working instead because I need to be more successful before I get in shape, and you say, I'll never be healthy, I'm not a healthy person, and you're not consciously saying this to yourself. It's not like it's something that an affirmation you say. They're way deep down, deeply ingrained in you that you're not aware of, that when you try to go to the gym, there's friction. Those two things are competing against one another, and that's why you feel the draining energy. And what happens in your body is that when your behavior disagrees with your subconscious programs, what happens is the resources that should be used for energy start getting deployed in other places. Fight or flight resources, your parasympathetic nervous system comes more active, and the resources needed for longevity, health, energy, cognitive ability, emotional regulation don't get the resources that they need, which is why it feels draining. So sure, it sounds noble, right? A lot of the people that preach discipline are people that have been in the military or played sports, and somehow these war and sports analogies have made their way into personal life.
Well, I guess it's always made sense in a way. Obviously, now we're talking about it, there's light bulbs going off, but it has made sense because sometimes, maybe you're right, it's the military background of where it's come from, but you have to do the hard thing to achieve something.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, I guess. It's a tough one when you start really analyzing what's willpower, what's discipline.
Someone on LinkedIn yesterday said life is about suffering, right? Nope, not for everybody, maybe for you.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, then sure, you're definitely going to suffer along the way.
But that's definitely
not everybody. Not everybody sees it that way.
But that's definitely an extreme one. But I guess it's a tough one, right? Because you're right, there's all these different, like how people grew up, like the societal messaging or like whatever was going on in their conditioning, that's it. But for people who maybe don't have, I'm going to use the words wrong now that we've given them such strong definitions, but the willpower, who maybe have, like as a child, like put on weight and stuff, who didn't have the practices to go and take care of themselves and make healthy decisions, to drag themselves to the gym, and I use the word drag to maybe give it that negative connotation, to do that, what's
the alternative?
Frequency. Yeah.
So when we're doing this, right, sometimes it's misinterpreted and being like action doesn't matter, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we shift our thinking, our subconscious beliefs first. And when we shift our subconscious beliefs, the internal friction goes away, which makes the action natural and easy. And then when we take the action, it gives a feedback loop to our brain that says, oh, this is who I am. And you create a belief action feedback loop that strengthens the neural pathways and makes it way easier to sustain. right? And so it's not that action isn't important. It's just a very low leverage place to start. Okay. And when we try to start with action and it only succeeds 9% of the time and it feels hard and draining, that sends a feedback loop to our brain that says, I'm not going to be able to do this. It's right. This isn't who I am. I'm not going to be able to get in shape. And it actually works against you most of the time, and it gets the pathway stronger that you can't do it, right? So the process is to identify what are the things that I believe about myself in the world that are creating this friction, right? If I'm trying to go and make a speech, right? This has been me before, right? I'm going to make a speech to 1,000 people, right? I've done a podcast a million times, but for some reason when I'm in person, I feel anxious, right? And it won't go away. And so to look and say, what are the things that I believe about myself in the world that are causing this anxiety? Because it's not the speech. And to say, I'm afraid I'm going to screw up. Maybe I think I'm not successful enough to give these people advice. Maybe it's that I am just afraid of what they're going to think about me, or maybe like I'm trying to go in a different direction with ideas and I feel like I'm not prepared or whatever. That to look at what are these things that are happening automatically in my brain that are causing me to feel anxiety. You have to do deep introspection to find them. Now ENCODED.ai finds them for you in 45 minutes. Nice. To surface those things and say, are these facts? Like, is it a fact that I'm not successful enough to tell these people what to do? No, that's not a fact, right? Could I think about it a different way? Yeah, I could. What could I think about? That I'm not here to prove to these people that I'm successful. I'm here to empower them and inspire them with information that I have, right? And shift my intentions and my belief about why I'm there. And then through handwriting, which is by far the most effective process to do this, more effective than typing, speaking, visualizing, meditating, handwriting, because it requires you to think about what you're writing, to move your hand, to read what you're writing. There's a lot more activity, right? It sounds simple, but it's actually highly effective. Through handwriting, our mind, our subconscious mind, through repetition every day begins to adopt this new way of thinking. And then we don't feel as much friction, and then we show up, and then we land the speech, right? We feel less anxiety, we land the speech, and that tells our brain, whoa, when I show up this way and I do this thing, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I am. And that loop starts to spin, the neural pathway gets stronger, and then over time it just dominates the old pathway that caused anxiety.
I want to get this right. So the frequency map, the 6-tier frequency map that covers anything from survival and scarcity all the way to the frequency field conductor. For high achievers listening to the podcast, where do you think they sit, and what's the tell?
Based on our current data, we estimate that somewhere between 70 and 80% of the high-performing population operates in a high tier 1 state.
And can you break down what
tier 1.8, which is called default programming. Default programming is effectively whatever you've been told about how the world works is what you believe about how the world works. So you're most likely comparing your performance to other people. I know people that make $30 million that still feel like they don't have enough, and they're just comparing themselves to the person that has $100 million. And then when they get to $100 million, then they're comparing themselves to the person that has $1 billion. And it's a never-ending game of comparison and chronic dissatisfaction. You relate to the same way with time, that I'm always falling behind, that I don't have enough time, that there's not enough, right? That you have that type of approach in relationships, that you have an employee that's so good and you say, I'll never find another person like this. I need to keep them even if they're an asshole, right? Or in an intimate relationship, that like if this person leaves, I'm never going to be okay, even if they're not aligned with your life anymore. So and the thing about tier 1 is that when you're in it, you feel like it's normal. You believe that this is the way the world works. So when you operate there, you don't look for real solutions. The solutions end up being a productivity hack, a way to make more money, to impress people, things like that. And you live there. When you move to tier 2, you realize that everything, the way you've been operating, is a lie. That it's not actually that the world works that way. It's that you've been conditioned to believe that the world works that way, and therefore through confirmation bias, you've been living that way, but you don't have to. And then in tier 2, and I don't want to necessarily go through the whole thing, but in tier 2, you spend all your time searching for answers outside of you. So then you're going to the meditation retreat, you're reading books, you hire the coaches, I know that this isn't real anymore, but what is real, right? And so then you start searching for answers outside of you. And then eventually, to move to tier 3, you decide nobody else out there has the answer but me. And tier 3 there's more to it, but one of the key things in that one is the recognition that my subconscious beliefs are creating my experience. Everything in my life, the quality of my relationship, my finances, my health, my feelings on an ongoing basis are created through my subconscious beliefs, not through anything else. And the process of learning to trust yourself fully. And self-trust is quite misunderstood. To trust yourself fully, and then you would move into tier 4. And tier 4, again, there's a lot more to it, but when you reach tier 4, you have reached full emotional sovereignty, which most people think is impossible, which is that you never feel anxiety, guilt, frustration, anger, any cognitively driven negative emotion no longer exists in your experience. And I know this because it happened to me, and it's happened to several people that have used ENCODED. So this is now happening across a lot of people, and I am positive it's a human capacity, not these people are special. And you operate in a consistent state of calm clarity. No mental noise, no self-doubt, no negative emotions, and the way you show up is consistent all the time. Through all of that, then you start to build on top of that. With that foundation, now you can be creative. Now you can be truly visionary. Not like most people think they're visionary, they're building someone else's vision. They're building what they think they should build to make money or what a VC would want. That's not real vision. You can build real vision, and then over time you continue to move up that place. But we've had less than 0.5% of anyone we've measured is at tier 4. So the first 4 tiers are the most relevant to most people right now.
I'm very curious, from the people who have been at the highest tier, is there a consistent theme across them? Are they at it's like what we were talking about before, people tell themselves a story, once I get here, I can focus on these things. Has that been a theme in the people who are at the highest tier? Is it the people who felt they can make time for it? Is it the people who just gave it their all to focus on it? What's the kind of common pattern?
I don't think there is a common pattern yet. It's like, why are some people in top 1% shape and other people aren't? I think that it's actually about the structure. I think it's the difference that separates elite athletes from a regular athlete is not training volume. It's training structure and training strategy. So my belief is actually that, one, you have to decide it's important, right? You don't stumble into tier 3 by accident. You have to decide that it's important and then apply the right structure to getting there. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. The misconceptions around this are that people with more money have higher frequencies, or people that raise more money, people that have a bigger company, people that have more power. Those are the people that must be higher frequency, and that is there's zero correlation, zero. And so that's a misunderstanding around that, right? It's what's inside of you. It's how your nervous system operates. Other people can feel it. It's co-regulation, nervous system co-regulation. It's a phenomenon that people can. They don't consciously realize it, but your nervous system picks up on other people's nervous system signals. So that is a big misunderstanding. And then the second one is, I'm good, right? Like I've made $10 million or whatever. I've reached the point where I feel like I'm good. So now I'm just coasting. And there's a difference in internal motivations. We call them intentions. And one side of the spectrum is called hedonic intentions, meaning that you are driven to praise, external recognition, valuable collections, or to avoid pain, right? Which is basically how the entire society has been geared toward. And it's clearly proven that those methods do not actually create life satisfaction. And what does create life satisfaction is, I'm going to mispronounce the word, but I think it's eudaimic, which means that we achieve life satisfaction through the pursuit of our own capacity and potential. And through that pursuit, we can achieve things. However, it's not the driver. The driver is the pursuit of our potential and life satisfaction and capacity. And as we continue to grow, and I'm a product of this, it's just been amazing how I feel and the energy I have every day. I didn't think about these things. I just looked back and then realized that this is the case. That we can still achieve all these things, but what is the primary driver? And so when we think about frequency, the steps that we're taking, the tiers, is all about our capacity. It's all about achieving our potential. It's all about showing up for our family, for our community, for society in a way that creates a positive impact for everyone. And so that is and through that, we do collect a lot of resources, and then we deploy those resources not to buy a yacht and impress people, but to deploy those resources to help other people achieve their potential, to create an impact for people, so it's just it's a fundamental switch around how people have been driven to think about money and achievements and what is the North Star, I suppose. So it's interesting because when I share all these ideas, right, they're almost the exact opposite of what everyone has been conditioned to believe. And it's just crazy how accurate they are, but how foreign they might seem to people that have been conditioned by them.
Yeah, or never heard of them before. So is it a constant practice for you, Chris? Is it something
every
when
day?
You achieve, so it's every day. It is continued. Otherwise,
it's the number one thing that I do every day. Maybe I spend some days it's 20 minutes, some days it's 2 hours. It's like I have now woven in a process where our neuroplastic window is strongest the 30 to 60 minutes after we wake up, as long as we don't take in inputs. So if we wake up and look at our phone and look at our email, the neuroplastic window goes away and we're starting off our day that way. But if we don't take in inputs, we have this window where our mind is the most malleable, right? So I wake up and I go right into this process. My girlfriend does it we don't do it together. We're not sitting next to each other, but we both do it individually, and it's been amazing for our relationship and both of us individually. And so I work through this process, and then every once in a while I'll have an idea, and then I'll move in that idea and I'll start doing deep work, and then I'll come back to the process, and it's become it's a highly effective thing to do if you believe that clarity, vision, and creativity are the differentiating variables in today's world, which I believe. And so a lot of people are like, I don't have 15 minutes to do that, right? And the way that I look at it is, what is not being clear, not trusting yourself fully, not living the life you want to live, what is that costing you? It's costing you a lot more than 15 minutes a day. And so if you're grinding for 12 hours a day and you can't keep up with everything and things like that, at some point you have to look and say, like, the way that I'm living must be doing something wrong, right? Like it shouldn't be that way. And at some point you take a step back and say, whoa, like when I operate with clarity and I and I create clarity on where I want my life to go and what's important and what I believe, everything gets more smooth. I've had entrepreneurs that are burnt out, work 80 hours a week, and in 2 weeks, they're working 50 hours a week, making the same amount of money. And then in 2 months, their business runs on its own. On its own, from 80 hours a week, right? Them holding it all together, a total disaster. And so that shift is not created through a productivity system. It's created about how we automatically interpret everything that we're doing, because the person working 80 hours a week doesn't have to. They're doing it because their beliefs say, I have to hold this all together. It might fall apart. Like if I stop, then I'm going to fall behind somebody else. Like even though that client's a jerk, I need that client, or there's never enough clients. I don't know what we're going to do, right? They're creating their own situation through
The story they tell themselves.
it's not even a conscious story, their subconscious beliefs, but yes.
I think it's fair to say we're probably still pretty early in the world of awareness around frequency training. You gave an example a while ago that I liked. It was, or it was a story. It was a historical fact even. In the 1940s, doctors told people not to exercise. In the 70s, only 15% of Americans did exercise, and now it's normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel frequency training will go the same way or should go the same way?
It will. It's already obvious in all the research.
What do you think would prevent it or stop it from happening?
Nothing.
Nothing. You think the way the world's going, it's driving people to it, or what do you think are the factors that will make it become normalized, like exercise?
All the drivers. Knowledge work becoming an abundant, less premium resource is going to move people to have to move up from the conscious level to the subconscious level. So it's going to force the elevation of human capability. The research is already abundantly clear. You see people taking it. There's already trends on the angles of emotional intelligence, nervous system regulation, biohacking. They're all coming at it from the wrong angle. Slightly, like emotional intelligence isn't a skill, right? It's not a technique that you learn so that someone feels comfortable. Like maybe that's emotional intelligence. That's not what frequency is. Frequency is showing up that way automatically because your beliefs have been set that way. Biohacking, they're all focused on the physical. They have no appreciation for the psycho-emotional part of it that actually is the number one driver to wellness and longevity from my perspective. And so there's already all the patterns and trends that are happening. However, nobody's packaged them in a way to be used. And so when you go back to, I think it was 1936, the first person who opened a gym, doctors were like, that guy's a circus performer. Never go to that gym, right? Doctors were like probably telling people to smoke cigarettes back then. And to go in bed rest and exercise might damage your heart, so don't exercise, right? Then they talked about how in the 50s, 60s, 70s, Time magazine put something out that said that lifting weights is only for circus performers. And they would make these little jokes on their magazines about exercise and saying that it was for circus performers, not for a normal person, right? And then you had Nike, where running wasn't popular, and now like tons of people run. And then in the 90s, the science finally started catching up. And then by the 2010, people were like, oh, this is obvious, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at that, I think a lot of people think of me like the first gym owner, right? How many gyms are there now?
Yeah.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in the world. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's that much scale related to frequency training as well. Because when you think about a human and their well-being and performance, you have the physical element of it, right? I need sleep, nutrition, supplements, diagnostics, exercise, right? Those ones are very well studied. And then you have the psycho-emotional and the nervous system, which is driven through your subconscious beliefs automatically. And all of that stuff, like how your nervous system responds, decides whether your cardiovascular system is regenerating or declining. It just decides where how your hormones are being expressed in your endocrine system. It expresses in how your digestive system is performing or getting in your way, how your mind is working, whether you're stressed or not stressed. All that stuff is happening automatically through your nervous system. And so when you can appreciate that and realize, oh, there's a huge connection between how my nervous system performs and how long I live, how my heart performs, how I digest my food, and how I show up in work and everywhere else in my life, to me, it's just obvious. And so I am certain that it will be as popular as exercise. The question, it won't take as long as exercise. It won't be from 2026 to 2106. It won't take that long. My expectation is it'll be 5 to 10 years before it's mainstream accepted.
One final question, Chris, before we wrap up. The knowledge worker warning. So for somebody listening right now who's a knowledge worker, marketing director, a lawyer, consultant, what should they do in the next 90 days to prepare them for everything that's coming?
So I definitely highly recommend that you sign up on the email list and read my book the first time that whenever it's available, definitely within the next 90 days, because I'll provide a high level here, but the book is like 250 pages and gives you all the context to really understand what's happening, both at the economic level and physiologically. And so the things to realize is that, number one, is that during all of these economic transitions, every institution lags. In the factory worker to transition to knowledge worker, vocational schools were still the most popular thing, even though they weren't teaching knowledge era work, right? So the schools lag behind, just like the colleges and universities are lagging behind now. Corporate culture lags behind. Professional communities lag behind. And the lag is not that they say don't use AI. The lag is that they say keep being a knowledge worker better. That's what the lag is. And those institutions are all built for stability. And at the beginning of their decline, that's when they're the most profitable. So they have no incentive to change, right? Harvard has no incentive to switch from knowledge work to teaching frequency right now. They wouldn't even be able to teach it. They have to train it, right? So they have no incentive to do it. So they're going to keep using knowledge work and bolting on AI or a course around it. So from every angle in the mainstream, you see, I'm doing the right thing. Everyone around me is also doing the right thing. So there's this lag and cultural mainstream that clouds you from seeing what's actually happening. And when that happens, you typically fall into up to 5 different traps. The first trap is trying to learn more. So you go back to school and get an MBA, right? Even though the value of an MBA is declining in a rapid rate, right? You go and take an AI course or something like that. So you try to learn more, even though the premium on learning is going down really fast. You try to work harder, right? Work effort has been the way that you get to where you've wanted to go all before. So when you start seeing declining returns on effort, and now 10 hours a day isn't doing it, you bump it up to 12, right? You just keep working harder is another trap that people fall into. The third trap is credentials. So it's sort of in learning more, but it's like that you go back to school, you try to get a different title, even though what the credential certifies is falling in value. The credential certifies knowledge that's falling in value, so it's just a proxy. The fourth one, which is definitely the most deceiving, is the AI augmented version of the trap, which is that you just go all in with AI and you just you learn the tools, you produce as much knowledge work as possible. You got OpenClaw set up, running 100 agents, and what you're doing is just being like Gary, being the best worker of the machine that's going to take their job. And then we have the fifth trap, which is to optimize harder. More product, it's just it's always worked in the past, so it's just more productivity systems, accountability, figuring out how to slot my schedule so I can do 4 meetings in an hour instead of 2, like all this the productivity optimizing hacks. And what you're doing is simply optimizing inside of a game with rules that aren't working anymore. So it's just you're working harder, being more efficient to the wrong destination, more or less. And so to be aware of all of the traps that are set, and these are not just this is not just now. The factory worker had the same type of traps, the same institutional lag. The farmer, back in the 1890s, where they started bringing the machines onto the farm before they used to work with their hands, right? the farmer had the same exact traps, just in a different technological and economic shift. So this is not like a one-time thing. There's been repeated in history for the past 200 years through every modern economic transition. And so to be aware of all that different stuff and to look at the direction that you're going and say, because what's happened is that fundamentally the rules of the economy are changing and the game is changing. And so if you're looking at it and say, which game am I playing? Am I trying to be a better knowledge worker that uses their conscious mind to make money? Or am I trying to be a better frequency era? I call it a human, right? It's the full capability of a human expressed in this era that the other economies didn't have room for, didn't have the economic driver to value, to fully show up as a human with self-trust, autonomy, vision, all of these capabilities that we all have. Are the things that you're doing moving you to that new economic era, just like Gary the factory worker learning how to use their mind to contribute to the economy, or are you doing better at the game that's declining? So I think that's a good way to pose the question for people. And if you're interested in knowing more, like the detail the book goes into is amazing. I'd highly recommend it. It's by far the best piece of professional work I've ever created, and I've created a lot of work, so I'm excited for the impact that it's going to have, not only for the individual, but I think for society. Like I think people see one path here, which is that humans don't have jobs anymore, and I think this is simply the invitation for humans to become even more human. And so what I'm looking at it is that you have artificial intelligence, which can do information processing, pattern recognition, accumulate knowledge. And it's the emergence of human intelligence and this distinction between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. What can't AI do? AI can't have discernment. It can't know what's right for you in this exact situation. It can't be truly creative. It can match patterns in the past, but trust me, I've tried to create something entirely new with AI. It doesn't work. It only knows what's already happened, not what could happen in the future. It can't be visionary. It's only matching historical patterns. Like visionary is looking into the future, imagining something new and then working backwards. AI fundamentally has to just work backwards. And there's many other things to connect deeply with humans, right? Like imagine how much more hollow this would feel if this was a AI hologram of me versus me. It's like I'm bringing my nervous system, my experience, all this type of stuff that will never be replicated by a robot. It's not like it's just going to happen 5 years later. It will never. It's a fundamental limitation of the technology. And so when we look at it that way, then we can say, okay, if AI is taking all this stuff, what isn't it taking? And then focus there, which is basically the case that I'm making for people.
I love it, Chris. Thank you. So with that, when can people expect the book? And if people want to learn more, what website should they visit? Where can they find you talking about these things?
Awesome. So the book is called The Frequency Era. I am hopeful that it is out by April 20th. Well, 420. Not planned. I promise. I used to smoke weed, but I don't smoke weed anymore. And if you want to get updates on the book and I share these insights through email and other places. There's at the bottom of ENCODED.ai. There's a place to sign up for the emails, and that'll be the first place that the announcement for the book when it's finally available is made. So I'd invite you to sign up for that, and also to check out ENCODED. Right, like to me. There's been times where I'm like selling something and I feel like I'm trying to like convince someone or get someone to buy something. But right now I feel like it's just an invitation to improve your life. And so I don't feel like that about pitching or inviting people to try it.
Perfect. Chris, thank you so much for your time and for coming on the pod.
Amazing. Good to be here. Thanks, bro.